Welcome to today's Industry Insights webinar, Revolutionizing Higher Education, Data Automation for Enhanced Efficiency and Innovation. My name is Jason Martin. I'm an online event production manager at EDUCAUSE, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Our panelists will introduce themselves in just a moment, but I want to give you a brief orientation on our session's learning environment. We hope that you'll be interactive with us in this session. You can do so by opening the chat, clicking on the chat icon at the bottom of the presentation window. You can use the chat to make comments, share resources, and to pose questions for our presenters. When you do so, please be sure to select everyone from the chat drop-down menu so that you can engage with all participants. We do encourage you to type your questions into the chat throughout the webinar, and we'll try to get to all of them during our more formal Q&A at the end. If you have any technical issues throughout the webinar, you can please send us a message by selecting hosts and panelists in the chat drop-down. With that, thank you for joining us, and I'll hand things over to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Jason. Appreciate the introduction, and I appreciate all of you joining us. It looks like we've got about 70 people so far, which is very good attendance. So thank you for your time and your attention. Today's panel discussion is going to be that. It's going to be a panel discussion. We're going to be talking about data warehouse automation. I've been working with WhereScape. We are one of several companies that build tools for data warehouse automation. I've been working with WhereScape for a little over 4 years now. And one of the things I've learned is that data warehouse automation is a term that people either haven't heard of and don't understand, or they kind of think they understand what it is. So we're going to talk today a lot about in the academic environment, higher education academic environment, what is it? What does it do for you? When is it appropriate? When is it not appropriate? As I said, my name is Patrick O'Halloran. I'm a product specialist at WhereScape. With us, we've got two panelists. We have Kevin Marchbank and Kishore Tumuluru. Kevin, I've worked with for many years as well, a former WhereScape employee, is now president of the Data Vault shop and has a lot of experience in a lot of environments. So we rely on his knowledge and experience in not just the theoretical aspects of data warehouses, but the practical application of where the rubber hits the road. Kevin, you want to give yourself a quick introduction, please?
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. Long background in databases, data warehousing, and analytics. And as Patrick said, a lot of experience in building data warehouses using data warehouse automation across both education as well as many other industries, and on a myriad of platforms. I'm sure questions will come up about that. So just glad to be here today and walk through some of those scenarios and try to help explain data warehouse automation.
Right, appreciate it. Thank you. And then also joining us is Kishore Tumuluru from Rochester Institute of Technology. Rochester Institute of Technology is a fairly recent customer of WhereScape, and we've had the chance of working with them for a few months now. Kishore, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Thanks, Patrick. Hi, everyone. This is Kishore Tumuluru. Same background as of Kevin. For the more than 20 years, I've been working on different platforms, building warehouses, databases, a lot of ETL stuff, collecting data sources from multiple disparate sources, integrating them into unified platforms. And all of my 20 years was in healthcare, unfortunately, but we recently moved to RIT, and I'm leading the data engineering team here. We moved to data warehouse automation, fairly new, as Patrick mentioned, and we are liking it so far. So I'm glad to be here, meeting you all, and answering any of your questions here. Thank you. Thanks, Patrick.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm just going to talk for just a couple seconds about WhereScape, who we are, what we do. It's about 60 seconds, and then we'll move on to the guts of this. So WhereScape as a company has been around about 20 years. We started as a consulting company building data warehouses in New Zealand, and realized we were doing a lot of repetitive tasks. So in the early 2000s, we started developing tools for automating that, generating code, not just the code generation, but the architecture and design, automating that part as well. And now we've got about 1,200 customers around the world, pretty much in every field you can think of, every vertical, whether it's education, government, NGOs, finance, manufacturing. And the big thing about data warehouse automation is increased efficiency. And I'll talk about that in just a bit. But what does automation do for you? We talk about 5 main things: cost, risk, complexity, urgency, and agility. So cost is kind of obvious in that if I'm 8-10 times as productive, if we literally have customers that have taken a year-long project and finished it in 4 weeks. The ability, not just with WhereScape, but with any good automation tool, the ability to produce a lot of code, a lot of deliverables much faster. And what's not obvious is the quality level, because you're interacting less. Every time you touch a keyboard, every time you press a key, you have a chance of making a mistake. You'll find that the rate at which you can get things done is much faster. Risks, data warehouses are vastly complex projects, primarily because people don't know what they want until they see it. With the data warehouse automation, your ability to prototype very, very quickly. Complexity. There's a lot of different source systems, a lot of different targets. Warehouse automation can definitely help with that. Urgency and agility. Agility is probably one of the key things in terms of developing a good data warehouse. One of the cornerstones of the agile development environment is rapid prototyping, and the idea that I can develop working prototypes in minutes. I can sit down with a data analyst and rapidly create tables, functions, procedures, migrate data, do all that they can now use Tableau or Power BI or export to Excel, whatever they're doing, and really give me immediate feedback on this incremental approach to development. We use this slide to kind of explain what development looks like without automation. There's a lot of tools, there's a lot of handoffs, there's a lot of steps, there's a lot of disjointed steps. And what you'll find with automation is that a lot of this is done either automatically, a lot of repetitive tasks are done automatically, and that the handoffs are eliminated, meaning that, as I said, you can create things much faster and better. I'm going to talk a little bit about what automation is and then get into the roundtable discussion. And I was last, I think, summer online, and I read an article that talked about vehicle automation and how Mercedes-Benz had developed level 3 driving automation. And I had no idea what level 3 driving automation meant, but dive a little bit. I'm a curious guy. I like to learn things. Turns out the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, NHTSA, has standards for 6 levels of driving automation. And the takeaway here is that it's not a switch. It's not on or off. It's not like you have automation or you don't have automation. But there are different levels of automation, primarily driven by the level of involvement of the driver in this case. And I thought, how does that apply to data warehouses? So what I did is I came up with my 6 levels of data warehouse automation, because data warehouse automation also is not an either or thing. There's things you can do. You can use templates, you can use code generation. Again, the critical thing going from level 0 to level 5 is the involvement of the developers, the designers, and stuff. So this kind of sets the context for our discussion today. Data warehouse automation is a spectrum. It's a continuous thing. It's not like, as I said, you have it or you don't have it. And I would say right now, going by this, the industry is probably at level 3, design, develop, deploy, using tools that have an understanding of data warehouse architecture and design, and using rules-based systems to apply attributes and transform data as needed. And level 4 and 5 are getting to the point where you're bringing in not just source data, but metadata, data about data, data catalogs, and things like that. Kevin, you've been using data warehouses for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on where the industry in general stands in terms of automation? What kind of involvement do people have today versus 10 years ago, and where do you think we're going to be in 5 or 10 years?
Oh boy, that's it's a all time, huh? Yeah.
We'll start off with an easy question.
Well, unfortunately, it's all over the place. I see various things. I see people go back and forth. And really, people think that AI is going to solve a lot of things, and I really don't see that happening. I see it help in various areas, and I know that WhereScape and other companies are starting to look at how AI can help with the automation that's already been built. But realistically, also a lot of vendors of the platforms are trying to create different pieces of automation. Unfortunately, they end up creating really a stew of various features that people still have to put together by hand. And that's one of the wonderful things about working with data warehouse automation with WhereScape specifically, is just that regardless of the platform, it's taking care of all those features, those pieces, and the automation is what allows the organizations to focus on the real problems. We're talking about education. How do we get the various measures that we want through the system from our various sources, tied together and delivered for reporting? Well, a big part of this is making sure we understand where we're getting the data and how that's tied together, and let the automation take care of all these pieces in between. It's never going to do everything. Automation will never do everything for you. You still need, I always tell people, you need a smart person behind the keyboard. You still have to be talking to the business, and that should not be presumed to be a part that ever goes away, because there just isn't anything that's going to solve all that for everyone. I can keep talking, but I'm going to pause. I'll let Kishore.
Okay. Kishore, you've been using data warehouse automation. Do you just for a background, do you want to talk about Rochester, RIT, what you guys are building, and just the whole process of how do you get requirements? What do you produce? How do you deliver it?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with what kind of disparate sources we have. So as a as an education institute, we have different domains like finance, student, HR, housing, so all over places. Right? Data comes from all over places. And we don't have a solid unified data warehouse where everyone can log in and see and drive the useful information they want. So the main intent, the main biggest challenge for us was integrating all data into one unified platform. And there are several ways to do that. But data warehouse automation helped us leverage a lot of skills. We have a very small shop here, very small body. No one has data modeling skills or anyone. So everyone has some domain knowledge. So I thought, okay, automation is kind of a tool we need. So the way it helped us is the biggest challenge we had was profiling. So nobody knows like what kind of data has the other domain has. So the profiling piece, it used to be a biggest challenge to understand the data, but that automation helped us a lot by profiling the data and what kind of data model we need to prepare. So that gave a good insight for us to prepare the road ahead, which was building a data model. And then how to integrate all the sources and how to make the useful extract out of it, how to make business rules engine on top of it so that across enterprise can use those. So things along these lines helped us. Data warehouse automation helped us a lot. I can give more examples, but yeah, to your question, that's how we started.
So is your organization, your analytics group, are they part of the academic environment itself? Are you part of, let's say, the College of Engineering or Analytics, or are you more of a independent of any part of the academia itself?
Yeah, we are independent. We won't tie with any of the organization here. So we, as a data engineering team, collaborate with each and every domain, so each and every user, and try to understand what they're trying to get out of this data. And we tell, okay, if you are looking for this use case, we already have something out there that is coming from different department. So we try to integrate with them and understand and collaborate with them. So make a better use case out of it, and then try to build that in a BRE engine for them.
Is your deliverable the data warehouse itself, or are you producing reports and dashboards and things of that sort?
For now, we are we are giving one of a reporting kind of, we are supporting reporting end, but we don't have a huge DSS system built out. So everything has to come down to data warehouse. So everything is ad hoc reporting now. So we don't have a huge DSS system and huge Power BI, I mean, any reporting tool on top of this.
Okay, Kevin, and you've worked with commercial and governmental and educational organizations.
Yeah.
Are there general things you can describe about the way an analytic group within a higher education works differently than, say, a business or a government organization?
You know, I see similarities and actually different ways of going about it across educational organizations as well as commercial, et cetera. Again, I think what's super important, and also what the agility that automation brings to the organization is allows those teams to be more engaged with the business. So that's going to be, for instance, even if it's a separate organization, to be involved with the educators and having those conversations about what metrics and things need to be provided. And one of the things I like to use as a reference point is like a baseball card. So a baseball card, if anybody's ever collected baseball cards or football cards, hockey cards, or Pokemon, my son has Pokemon cards. So if you look at those, they've got various metrics that are important to identifying how that particular person has, whether it's their skills, what they're good at, if they're a pitcher or a fielder, whether, their batting statistics, various statistics important to that particular sport. And the same is true for organizations with their departments, their various organizations. What metrics, we refer to dashboards or scorecards. Scorecards aren't used as, that reference is a little bit dated at this point, but balanced scorecarding, things like that. Those are good starting points for those discussions and for deciding what you're going to be sourcing and bringing in. It's very rare for a team to have a blank check to just go build this ambiguous thing called a data warehouse. Typically, you're going to want to start with some sort of requirements, and that's usually best done with whoever is your executive sponsor within the organization, or with the teams that are the main customers, and starting with that to make sure that you're providing value sooner than later. And again, that's what automation is bringing to the table, is that you can go after that data. You're not spending your time with all the, I call it the meat and potatoes of the data warehousing. The automation takes care of the profiling of the data, bringing it in so you can understand it and bringing it through. And you're not worrying about all these lines of code and things like this that have to be done by hand.
Yeah, a question did come up. When you do say code, do you mean ETL, ELT code?
Either. It's whatever you are producing. You can do ELT, you can do ETL. There are obviously best practices in different areas, and those can be discussed, but your tools should be, if you're going to select a tool, you want a tool that can be configured as well. So that's one of the things Patrick's talking about, these levels of automation. You do need a tool that can be configured as well. For somebody to bring something to you and say, hey, this is going to solve all your problems. I think we've all been sold things like that before. You need to make sure that whatever you're looking at has the ability to be tweaked and configured for your particular situations. There obviously are standards in the industry, and those things need to be taken care of by the tool, but there's always going to be unique situations, the ability to put in your own transformations at whatever points you need to. You may be choosing different methodologies. There's different ways of building warehouses, and the tools should be able to support those various methodologies so that your teams can make those decisions and do what's best for your organization. Similarly for platforms. So what are you going to automate on top of? There's a myriad of platforms you can choose to build your warehouse on. And a lot of times that's driven by what your organization already is using. If they're using SQL Server or Oracle, or maybe they've moved to Snowflake or Redshift, your platform that you choose for data warehouse automation should be able to support all of those various things. Likewise, one of the things I've seen organizations go through is they think they're going to choose a platform and never change that. And I've seen plenty of organizations actually get directive to change which platform they're operating on. So that's definitely a consideration as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's definitely true about data warehousing in general is you don't know where you're going to be in 3 years or 4 years. With say software development, which is my background, I as a programmer, I should say recovering former programmer. When someone asks what's automated here, do you mean ELT, ETL code? My go-to concept in terms of production is producing code, writing code. But there's a really good book I was given in the 1980s, if I want to date myself, titled The Mythical Land Month, where they talk about code by itself is not useful. It has to be documented, it has to be tested, and it has to be useful in some way. And so when we talk about automation, it's not just a code generator. If I had said I've got a tool that'll generate ETL, ELT code, according to this chart of 6 levels, I might call that level 1 or level 2. What other kinds of things are automated? Design, deployment, modeling. If you're doing dimensional modeling with facts and dimensions, the idea that the knowledge of that is built into the tool. The idea of being able to create schedules to run the data pipelines, to move data through the data warehouse, so you can automate that. The documentation is a big deal, being able to create full documentation automatically. Michael is asking about that book. It's called The Mythical Man Month. It's a really good book. I've got it right here. I actually have it with me almost all the time. I was given this as a gift in the 80s. It mostly talks about large operating system development, but a lot of the concepts are timeless. About one of the key precepts is adding people to a late software project makes it later, which is probably true of data warehouse projects too. One of the nice things about automation, if I can throw a plug in there for that, is that, or to tie in, is that people are developing things in the same way, the same style. There's a lot of consistency and much less of a learning curve. Kishore, you had talked about being previously in the financial area and moving into higher education. When you were in finance, did you have any kind of automation tools? What kind of tools did you have to develop your data warehouse in previous environments?
So you got me wrong. So I said I was from healthcare, but yeah, but to your question,
Healthcare.
Yeah, from our we get a lot of requests from finance team here in RIT, like student level information. So what are my total fund that we received, total what do you call grants that we received, we spent, and all those things. So all those reports that we need from finance. So we pull out of data warehouse. So we use student and finance data for that, and our different systems from ProSam, HR, all those systems we collaborate and then unify them into one data warehouse. For that, we use data warehousing automation, and then build on BR engines on top of that. So each and every use case, like each and every when I say use case, they said, okay, what is my net spent amount on all the funding that I received? In that case, so it should remain constant across enterprise. So no matter what, if finance team is pulling, our admission team is pulling, our HR team is pulling, it has to be same. So things along those lines, we standardize the rules there in the BR engine, and we publish those views or reports.
Right. But when in previous jobs, when you didn't have data warehouse automation, what was the development process like? How did you get requirements? How did you produce code? How did you get things deployed?
Oh yeah, that's a long chain. So coming from healthcare, oh yeah, so building a data warehouse is it's a year-long project, right? I mean, it's not so easy. So starting from gathering requirements, so what kind of data we need to store in a data warehouse. So profile the data, so understand the data well. I mean, I think these 2 steps will take a lot of time. And from there, okay, now we know the data. We initially know what kind of data we are building in data warehouse. Now, what kind of model we need to do? I mean, how efficiently can I store this data into the data model? So data model is one piece, like defining what attribute types, I mean, it's going to be like, what are my data types and all those things. So those are the requirements. Those comes from the requirements as well. So once we have the designing, now the biggest piece is again ETL. So maybe we can use some ready-made tools like Informatica or DataStage, something like that. So building ETL stuff. So we have that huge chunk. So are we building any dimensions on top of database? Or are there any story changing dimensions? So things like that. I mean, if the requirement keep changing, we need to change all the code. I mean, right? It go back again. It start again from the requirement, from the design, from the data model changes and everything, and the ETL changes. And after all this done, we need to do testing. And unit testing has to be done, all kinds of testing. And once everyone is agreed, the business is said, okay, we are okay with the initial release, then they need documentation for the lineage and all those things. So all these are different streams of work and different teams work, and we need to collaborate with all the teams year long, and it's never going to end. But the advantage here with database automation is it does everything for you, right? From the profiling to generation of the documentation, it does everything. And building, I mean, changing any dimensions is like a split of a second. So we don't need to even make any major design changes or change all the ETL code and all those things.
Yeah, you mentioned profiling data, creating a data model, defining attributes, writing ETL code through Informatica to get things done initially, and then rework, unit testing, documenting, and reporting on the lineage. And that is one of the nice things about data warehouse automation. So I take it now that you're using warehouse automation. You did say this. All those things are on my earlier slide. The staircase of doom. Those would have been individual steps with separate tools. Let me ask the question this way: if you were doing that manual process of having to do the data profiling and the data modeling and define the attributes and write the ETL code and unit test it, without warehouse automation, and someone came and said, hey, our source system has say a new dimension that didn't, or new data that we want to model as a dimension, roughly how long would it take to get something like that in front of an analyst to show them, here's the dimension we've created, here's the code we've written to populate it, here's the profiling and things we've done to look at the data? I mean, just on a rough scale.
Upscale, it'll take at least a month, right? Starting from the requirements and to deliver it, it's going to take roughly a month.
And now you're doing something similar at RIT with automation. Roughly how long is that kind of thing taking now?
Less than an hour. That's what. Yeah, that's what we like. As I started the conversation, we are very less with the resources here. I mean, one more point you missed to ask. I mean, the timeline is 1 month, but with how many resources? So with like at least 10 or 15 resources working on it, the same thing. But with just one resource in 1 hour, we can achieve all these things.
Yeah, I know. When I go ahead, Kevin.
I was just saying, don't forget the documentation.
Yeah.
That's one of the unheralded things. It's one of those things that everybody likes, everybody wants, but nobody wants to do. In software developing and even in data warehousing and things, I always describe the documentation phase as the point where someone runs around and grabs all the Post-it notes and types them into Word, and it's obsolete as soon as you save the document. The nice thing about automation, again, it's not just code generation, it's data lineage. It's understanding what transforms are taking place, so that you can generate really extensive documentation that allows analysts and developers to really understand what is this thing. And literally with a couple clicks of the mouse or through a cron job or a daily schedule job, you can regenerate it every morning, and people can come into the dev environment and have accurate documentation.
Yeah, and again, I work exclusively with customers that use data warehouse automation, and I sometimes forget about how inefficient those processes are. But I just got done the real world scenario, 2 months of consultants' time going through SharePoint, trying to archive outdated documentation out of SharePoint on their warehouse that was not generated from an automation tool. So it's a big cost, because referring to outdated documentation, it can cause worse problems and more wasted time than I think anybody can realize. That's, you know, by the time somebody goes through documentation, starts to use it, and then realize it's wrong. I mean, that's a pretty terrible situation and a big waste of time.
Yeah, and Kishore, you mentioned not just the amount of time, but the number of different people involved in creating a dimension from scratch, doing the profiling all the way to testing. I'm assuming some of that requirement comes from the technical skills that are required. Do you want to give a brief discussion about how using data warehouse automation changes the technical level of expertise that the data engineers have to have?
Oh yeah, and yeah, in the olden style, as I mentioned, so we need business analysts, data modelers, DBAs sometimes, and ETL developers, testers, and testers and developers will develop the documentation as well. But here, using the data warehouse automation, we really no need to attain all those skills, like especially data modeling skills. You don't need to be too much expertise to pull up a domain. I mean, to pull up in a dimension here. So we can avoid that kind of knowledge. We don't need to have that ETL knowledge. We don't need to have the transformation rules apply and all those things. We don't need to have too much knowledge on that. We don't need to have a testing knowledge and testing automation knowledge. We don't need all those things. Using data warehouse, I mean, we should have some basic knowledge of what data warehouse is and what kind of data we're pulling, and how and where we need to land the data. So things like that, basic skills and basic knowledge should be suffice to pull something like this small requirement.
So let me go through my list of questions. A question I think I know the answer to. I talked about the stairway of doom. We've been talking about all the positive things about data warehouse automation. And Kevin, this may apply more towards you since you've seen a lot of different areas. What are the drawbacks? I mean, it can't be all sunshine and rainbows.
Well, yeah, I think it's like anything. If you aren't committed to actually embrace data warehouse automation, and you know, the biggest failures I would say that I've seen with trying to implement data warehouse automation, honestly, comes down to politics and embedded consulting organizations or teams that want to do it by hand because they want to be working with particular resume building, essentially, and billable hours. So I know it seems silly, but that really is the biggest drawback, is that people don't want to embrace and actually provide value to the organization. Because that's what data warehouse automation is allowing you to do, is to spend the time determining what's the right data, getting your business rules and your reporting correct, instead of writing code and building your resume with certain technologies. Honestly, if you're going to want to provide, if you want to provide value to the organization, then you're going to embrace data warehouse automation, and you're going to, so that you can spend your time on the actual business valuable questions that need to be answered, those things that are actually going to help drive profitability, efficiency, and all those things in the organization, versus, oh, hey, let me go play with this particular feature or function. I've been on some crazy calls where people are asking, well, can data warehouse automation do this particular very obscure feature? And then you ask the question, okay, where do you guys use that? Well, we don't. We would just want to know that you can do that. Well, you need a use case. Now, not that those nuts can't be cracked, but it's in the end, I would say it's kind of like Pareto's law, 80-20 rule. It's going to take care of 80%. And I would even argue even more of that, of the automation. But the other 20% is stuff that you don't want automated. You need to go and talk to your educators, your administrators. You need to talk to the people that need information to get their jobs done, and they need to know how things are performing. Those are the value added things that now your teams can spend valuable time on, providing value to the business, instead of playing around with new features and functionality that every vendor in the world keeps putting out there. For that's a never-ending game.
Yeah, you made a good point. It doesn't apply to us directly here, but when I'm involved in calls and we're trying to explain WhereScape to prospects, the biggest pushback we get is from consulting and services organizations that are building data warehouses. And they're going, wait a minute, you're going to reduce my billable hours by 75%. And our response is always, well, either you fix fee or charge more. But the two biggest pushbacks I've seen are emotional. Yep. They are, as you said, I guess political is another good word for it. The consulting companies that are going, we're not going to be billing hours. But if you look at there's a subreddit called data engineering that I read. And the big thing there, those are code those are coders that mostly on there. And their concern is that if you adopt data warehouse automation, you're going to be fixed to a rigid path, that it generates inefficient code. And I'm a smart guy. I can write code much better and much faster than some dumb machine can. So Kishore, how would you describe that, if that's a concern that some people have, that data warehouse automation is rigid and forces you to do certain things in certain ways? What would your response to be to that? How flexible have you found it at RIT?
To be honest, I mean, we never encountered that kind of scenario. And to be honest, I mean, we personally, I mean, I came from a lot of coding background, and that's not a bad code either. I mean, the code that it generates it's good. And on top of that, it's not a no-code tool. It has its own coding support. So if you are very good at code, you can increase the efficiency of the code based upon your needs. But we never found that the code that it generates is not a bad code. It's really good code, I mean, honestly. And it can even support, like, we can provide external scripting on top of it, and we can add more to it. It's flexible. It's very flexible.
Or for someone who's just starting down the path, maybe they're doing Excel spreadsheets, maybe they're looking into a data warehouse, maybe they've got something that someone developed 10 years ago that they're kind of working with. Kevin, what kinds of words of advice would you give to someone who is looking at building a data warehouse, and maybe they're a smaller organization that may not have full-time resources available? What are the key lessons learned that you've seen that have differentiated a successful creation of a data warehouse from an unsuccessful one?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've seen organizations where, really what I tell them, and I've had organizations, one-person organizations that, or not the organization is one person, but the team is a one-person team taking on the build out of the data warehouse. And the beautiful thing with data warehouse automation, that there's two aspects that I really lean on there. One is that when we talk about, WhereScape, I think, says 8x improvement in efficiency, right? Well, the key point there isn't just 8x generically, it's 8x of the person, of the expert you already have on your team becoming more efficient. It's not like bringing in 8 more fresh people that don't understand the business. You're actually making your expert 8 times more effective, which is way more than bringing in 8 fresh people that need to learn your environment and your industry. So that's huge. It's your existing people that are being made more efficient. Also, it's helping teach your team how to do things well. So automation framework is going to say, well, this is by default what a dimension, we don't want to get too technical here, but type 1 or type 2 dimension, or a transactional fact table, or data vault. It's going to give you whatever methodology your organization has chosen. It's going to help you understand how to build those and give you some best practices and standards out of the box that follow the industry standards. Now, the more the deeper and wider the knowledge is of the team, they can take that and tweak it or make changes to it to build what they want it to build, or to change or take it as it is. I see that typically more than 95% of customers will use it out of the box with some minor tweaks for naming standards and things like that. But the thing is, take advantage of these tools. It's kind of like you're not going to go, if you want to be able to go out, go to the grocery store, 5 miles away, and you could walk there, but you're not going to go, you want to get there faster and be in a covered environment. You're not going to go build your own car. You're going to go buy a car. You're going to go get in that car and drive to the store. And similarly, my background is actually being a customer, a data warehouse automation customer. And actually prior to that, as a data warehouse architect with a large team, I had 13 people on the team. We built a large warehouse by hand, and very smart, very technically savvy team. And when I moved to organizations, I actually went and purchased data warehouse automation, and did more with myself and 2 other people than we had done with a 13-person team over the course of several years. So not only have I seen it as a consultant, but prior to that as a customer. And that's why I made the choice. I said, I'm never going to go build one by hand again. This is ridiculous how much work and time we wasted, let alone no documentation or very limited documentation after the fact when we did it by hand.
Yeah, the way I've described it in the past is that data warehouse automation doesn't just get you to the finish line faster, it changes the rules of the race.
Yeah, and one other thing I'd really like to mention to people too is, I know I've mentioned documentation several times, but another way I try to refer to it is transparency to your organization on the work that your team's actually doing. It doesn't just produce some generic Word doc, it produces an entire website, and you can see the whole data lineage of where this data is coming from. You can even see the code that's generating in a website so that they don't have to be in any sort of tools. They can just pull that information up. That gives transparency to the organization of everything that your team has been building out and what's available to them. The transparency is really important, and gives accountability as well, and lets them know. Sometimes it's hard for teams to communicate all the things all the stuff that's gone into what they've built and provided.
Yeah, the data lineage is an important part. I know that I've been on a couple of webinars just talking about data quality, data governance, and one of the questions that always comes up whenever an analyst presents a dashboard or a report or something is, do you trust the data, or where did this data come from?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get these numbers?
Right.
And obviously, if someone's going to make an important decision based on the analytics you're providing, it'd be nice for you to be able to explain exactly where you got the numbers. The nice thing about data warehouse automation is we're capturing all that through metadata. So all the way from a source system, any transforms that are done, aggregations, any denormalization, every single step of the way is captured, so that with literally a couple clicks, it's here's my dimension, my pits, bridges, whatever Excel spreadsheet, whatever it is I'm looking at with the data, I can go all the way back to maybe multiple source systems and look and very, very, very quickly identify where that data came from, how it got manipulated, and how it wound up where it's at, whether I did that work or whether someone else did that work. And I imagine in a smaller shop without data warehouse automation, all that knowledge is in someone's head.
And for very large organizations, I have a real world example with a large bank that went into with hundreds of developers. And one of the things they were just head over heels about with using data warehouse automation was that the auditors would come through, and for their particular division using WhereScape, they said the auditors come in, we produce the documentation, hand it to them, and we never see them again. And which was huge for them, whereas other teams were spending weeks, if not months, with auditors pouring through things to figure out, were they following everything that was required. So that was a pretty cool real world scenario, and really nice to see the big smiles on their faces about that.
Yeah, Renu asked a question, will the WhereScape documentation provide complete lineage of the data elements? Whether it's WhereScape or another data warehouse automation tool, obviously I have my preferences about which one I think is best, but with any good data warehouse automation tool, it will have data lineage that will show you at the column level or the table level where all the data came from. Within WhereScape, there's an IDE you can use. You can right click on it and say track back diagram, and right in front of you is the entire lineage. As I said, maybe it's coming from multiple source systems. Maybe you're combining data from a web API, from an Excel spreadsheet, from a CSV, and from a couple databases, and you're manipulating all that data to get some final result. It literally is 2 mouse clicks on any object, and you can see where that data came from. As I said, it's and in the documentation as well. So I don't need to actually be using WhereScape or my automation tool. All that's in the documentation, which, as Kevin said, is created as an HTML file, which is wide open. It's that visibility everybody has to what does the data warehouse look like, and how is it put together? How does it build? How is it built? What are all the transforms that take place? Let me go back and, as you said, audit or look back and see where the data came from.
And forward or backwards. So you can track forward and track backwards.
Yeah.
What you're looking for.
Yeah. Kishore, has that come up in your environment where someone has said, where did this data come from? Can you give us some documentation on how you're getting this information?
Yeah, just like Kevin mentioned, they were very happy. I mean, they never saw such kind of documentation here. The way it produced the documentation, they said, "Wow." So this is what we are looking. So it is clearly laid out, and everyone can easily understand. I mean, it's very easy to navigate through, and it's at the source level. I mean, no matter what, how many sources you are joining, no matter what, how many transformations you are applying, it gives everything.
If you didn't have that metadata that was capturing all that, and an analyst came to you and said, "Hey, I've got these metrics on a fact table. Can you tell me where they came from?" Without data warehouse automation, what kind of work would you have to do to figure that out?
Oh, come on. I don't know. It's a lot of work, right? I mean, it's a challenge for everyone, right? I mean, coming straight, and if we say, okay, this is a fact table, can you analyze this and tell me like what are all the sources feeding it? They have to go back. I mean, they have to do reverse engineering, a lot of things. I mean, and to be honest, they won't come up with 100% result, right? I mean, it won't be like trustable documentation or analysis. I think with automation, that's one of the biggest buying point for me. The way it shows the lineage is really awesome, and it's trustworthy.
And we mentioned testing earlier. I got a story about one of our customers that, excuse me, the QA department. So this is how automation touches groups outside of the data engineering group. This is the QA group. They looked at WhereScape, and after a while figured out that any code, any object that was generated automatically from the templates, meaning the DDL and DML, the code to create the object and create the transforms and things, anything that was generated by a template through WhereScape no longer had to go through unit testing. You could go straight into integration testing. And what that meant for the 200 or 300 objects that this group had created was, let's assume it takes 4 hours to set up and run and document a test. They just eliminated 800 to 1,200 hours of work because they were able to skip that level of testing because they had confidence that things were going to work. When I do live demos, that's one of the things I talk about is not only have I generated 500, 600 lines of code in a few seconds, but I've generated code that works. And as a programmer, I'm suspicious that something I write even compiles the first time. As Jason's been saying, you can stick any questions you have in the chat. If they can be general questions, they can be very specific questions. I know that one of the nice things about data warehouse, Kevin touched on this briefly, is being able to change the target. Let's suppose you're working with on-premise SQL Server today, and 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you want to move to Snowflake, you want to move to Databricks, you want to move to something that doesn't even exist right now. Kishore, have you run into that at RIT? Are you guys pretty firm in your understanding of what your technology or your technical base is? Your tech stack?
We actually encountered this issue. So when we started, we initially had our target instance on on-prem SQL Server. Then we moved it to Azure SQL, and from there we moved to managed instance, and now we are trying to move it again. So this is like, I mean, it's not like we don't have a solid understanding of what we need to do, just because of our requirement getting changing and the volume of data we are trying to ingest. So we are configuring different databases here. But it's a breeze. I mean, no matter what the target is, we just flip it, the target, and it's going to deploy right away. So that's a breeze.
Yeah, and Kevin, I know you worked with, I'll just call it a large Midwestern insurance group based in Minnesota.
Yep.
That was migrating from Teradata to Snowflake.
Yep.
In case you don't remember, this was about 2.5 years ago, so you may not remember it, but they came to us and said, hey, we've been using WhereScape on Teradata. What's it going to take to port this to Snowflake for a proof of concept? And there's a lot of steps involved in that, but I'll just say from the purely technical lift and shift of let's recreate the data warehouse in Snowflake with all the functions and procedures and scripts and everything that migrate all the data. We told them 40 hours.
Yep. And, honestly, depending on, how you develop that, it can be quicker. I had a large natural food company owned by a very large online retailer. That's let's say that as much. And as things go, a lot of times you don't know. Your organization may make changes from a corporate level, and that's what happened to this organization. Is that they were on Redshift, and they were given a direction to move to Teradata Vantage, which is Teradata's cloud offering. And they, because they had done everything within data warehouse automation, everything was in their modeling tool. We simply changed it in less than 24 hours. We had redeployed everything onto Teradata Vantage. Now, that's pretty amazing. Now, it didn't migrate the data for them, but their entire warehouse, their entire model, all the code was now Teradata code, Teradata objects, and everything up in Teradata Vantage in the cloud. So pretty amazing process. So a lot of executive and contractual and legal things involved in those type of decisions that sometimes we just don't have the ability to have any input into.
I'm assuming they're using AWS. Well, actually not. They're moving to Teradata. They could have been using Teradata.
It was on AWS.
Yeah. A question came from Hema. What would the process look like for a data warehouse shop that is completely manual today to move to, say, level 3 or level 4? What I would say is level 4 doesn't quite exist today. I would say the leading edge in data warehouse automation is probably 3, approaching 4. We're getting closer to 4. You may hear the term data fabric. Data fabric is a more encompassing term beyond just the data warehouse that involves data governance, data quality, data catalogs, and things of that. I think that's going to help get us to level 4 because people are going to have more data about the data. Kevin said you're never going to get rid of the human person who understands the business, understands the data, understands things that aren't documented. Then that's kind of what you need to get to level 4. So what's going to take to get from level 0 to level 3? As a consultant, I will just say it depends. That's my stock consultant answer. It depends. So what does it take to get to level 3 or level 4? It depends. Depends on what? Depends on what you want to do. Do you want to take your existing data warehouse and recreate it? Do you want to replicate it? Do you want to take this as an opportunity to update your technology stack and not just change your data warehouse, but change, say, the source, servers, the whole infrastructure that supports it? Do you want to use your existing warehouse and just make slight modifications to it going forward, knowing that you're going to be using an automating tool to help with that? So what does it take? It could be, we've got customers that are using WhereScape, using their existing data warehouse and their existing ETL tools, and then as they make modifications, they've replaced those components with WhereScape. We've got other customers that have decided that that's just too much work, that there's too many band-aids, there's too many levels of baling wire and string holding things together, and they want to start from scratch. So Hema, I'm afraid I can't give you a more specific answer than that, other than to say that It depends. Do you want to start from scratch? Do you want to slowly evolve from your existing infrastructure to new infrastructure, or do you want to make it more of a drastic switch? But we have customers doing it all the time.
Yeah, and I've had a large organization where what they did is they had an existing warehouse. What they did is they implemented data warehouse automation, and there's several things involved there. You can actually WhereScape specifically has ability to retrofit an existing warehouse into the metadata to suck that metadata out of your existing warehouse, so it sees those things inside of it. But I've primarily seen where they will install data warehouse automation and start using that going forward. And then different organizations, some have those were their older warehouse, they kind of let that die on the vine over time while they build everything new in warehouse automation. I've also seen organizations where they start building the new things within data warehouse automation, and they're like, wow, forget this, we're going to go ahead and take up reverse engineering or reworking everything into data warehouse automation that we do today. It depends on, again, there's a lot of ambiguity because underneath your question is, what is your existing warehouse and what are those things involved today?
Yeah, we've just got a couple minutes until the top of the hour. I said before we even got started today, as we were preparing for this, that I'm always thinking right before it starts, how are we going to fill an hour? What kind of questions are we going to have? I've got a couple questions, and it always seems like when we're done, it's like, oh, I wish I had 15 more minutes to talk about this. Kevin, Kishore, I appreciate your time, your expertise. We do have time for a couple questions. If anyone has any, there's still room in the chat room. I'm going to switch slides and show you two websites that Jason is going to put, or if he hasn't already, put in the chat, so you can get active links, atw.org and dvnog.org. The Higher Education Data Warehouse Forum is a nonprofit organization based on higher education data warehouses, believe it or not. They're having a webinar, a session, a live in-person session in Champaign-Urbana at the University of Illinois. I think it's around March 10th. We went to it last year. It was in Utah, Ogden, I believe, Utah, hosted by Bucknell, I believe. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm from the University of Illinois. I lived there for 18 years, so I'm looking forward to going back to Champaign-Urbana. And another organization, we haven't talked about it specifically, but there is a design methodology called Data Vault. If you're looking at building a data vault, dvnog.com, the Data Vault North American User Group, is also an excellent resource for information about Data Vault. Again, my name is Patrick O'Halloran. I have a profile on EDUCAUSE. You can reach me at patrick.o'halloran at wherescape.com, more info at wherescape.com. You can go to wherescape.com and request a link there. So again, Kevin and Kishore, thank you very, very much. I appreciate your time, and for all the attendees, I appreciate your time and attention. Jason?
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Yes, thank you both, or thank you all. In terms of the my colleague Nikki's going to put into the chat, or she already did, the link to the survey. We really appreciate your feedback, so please take the opportunity as we enter the new year to give us your feedback. It really does get used in how we do future programming. Beyond that, we also have the recordings will be available later today. In that, you'll be able to download the chat or see the chat transcript as well as the audio transcript. But that should be on the event page that you came in when you registered later today. Feel free to share that with your colleagues. Other than that, we thank you all so much. We hope you had a great new year, and we're excited to be back with our first webinar today of the 2024 year. So look forward to seeing you at the next one, and have a great day all.
Thank you.